For 48 hours, no call came. While President Trump's Venezuela operation unfolded, Keir Starmer waited by the phone. Britain wasn't consulted. Britain wasn't in the room. And when Kemi Badenoch asked the Foreign Secretary one simple question, the answer exposed everything. At exactly 2:17 p.m. on January 14, 2026, the House of Commons prepared for a Foreign Office statement on U.S. military action in Venezuela. Standard diplomatic briefing, carefully worded support, generic praise for UK-US cooperation. But Kemi Badenoch had spent 48 hours making calls to Washington contacts, former ambassadors, NATO sources. Every conversation confirmed the same reality. The Prime Minister had not spoken to the President before, during, or after one of the most significant American interventions in a decade. The Foreign Secretary delivered her statement emphasizing UK support for democratic transition and the strength of the special relationship. Her tone was confident, almost defiant. She concluded with standard praise, the leadership that this Prime Minister has shown on the international stage. Labour benches cheered. She sat down, visibly satisfied. Then Kemi Badenoch rose. She began diplomatically, thanking the Foreign Secretary, establishing proper parliamentary tone. But those watching recognized the pattern. This was methodical setup before a devastating strike. However, Madam Deputy Speaker, Badenoch continued, her voice shifting to surgical precision. We are in a fundamentally different world. The chamber quietened. She laid out context methodically. Maduro's dictatorship, UK-US agreement, he was illegitimate. China's expanding South American influence. She was establishing credibility, demonstrating conservatives understood complexity. Then she pivoted. Foreign policy should serve our national interest. The United States is our closest security partner. Labour MPs nodded, thinking she was supporting them. They didn't see what was coming. However, Badenoch paused deliberately. We do have concerns about what precedent this sets, especially when there are comments made about the future of Greenland. The Greenland reference was strategic, establishing she understood American unilateralism, setting up credibility for the knockout blow. Then at 2:23 p.m., 6 minutes into her response, she delivered it. I am pleased to hear that the Foreign Secretary has spoken to Maria Corina Machado. She paused. But can she also update the House on whether the Prime Minister has spoken to President Trump? The silence was immediate and total. The Foreign Secretary's face tightened visibly. She shuffled papers, searching for an answer that wasn't there. Conservative MPs erupted. Labour benches fell silent. But Badenoch pressed forward. And I ask this, because the government talks up its relationship with the US. But we keep finding that we are not in the room when big decisions are made. The phrase "not in the room" was a diplomatic hand grenade. It wasn't just Venezuela. It was about Britain's declining influence, about being excluded from decisions affecting UK security, about leadership claims not matched by reality. She opened her red folder, Labour frontbenchers visibly stiffened. But the facts tell a different story. The United States began planning this operation at least 2 weeks ago. Intelligence sharing between Five Eyes partners meant Australia, Canada, and New Zealand were briefed. Yet the Prime Minister received no advance warning, no consultation, no phone call. The revelation shocked the chamber. Britain excluded from a major Allied operation. Five Eyes intelligence sharing had bypassed the UK. The Foreign Secretary attempted to interrupt, but procedure gave Badenoch time to continue. Badenoch continued relentlessly. And in the 48 hours since American forces entered Venezuela, while the Prime Minister has made statements, given interviews and attended receptions, he has not had a single conversation with President Trump about this crisis. The specificity was devastating. 0 conversations during 48 critical hours. 48 hours while other Five Eyes leaders were briefed, consulted, kept informed. Then came the connection that would dominate conservative messaging. What is our government doing instead? Giving away the Chagos Islands and paying £35 billion for the privilege with no strong legal basis to justify this? The Chagos reference was surgical political framing. 2 separate foreign policy disasters linked into a single narrative of weakness. £35 billion paid to surrender British sovereign territory to Mauritius, despite Diego Garcia's strategic importance to Western defence. Meanwhile, £0 invested in maintaining the relationship with Washington that Labour claimed was unshakable. The mathematics of humiliation were inescapable. Billions for capitulation, nothing for influence, money for losing territory. Silence from America when it mattered most. When the Deputy Speaker restored order and called on the Foreign Secretary, the damage was done. She rose slowly, visibly rattled. Her hand trembled slightly, gathering papers. "I must say to the Leader of the Opposition," she began defensively, "that really felt like a very poorly judged tone of response that was really all over the place." The vague dismissiveness was a tell. Labour MPs shifted uncomfortably. Conservative MPs leaned back, satisfied smiles spreading. Journalists typed frantically, witnessing a genuine crisis unfold. She pivoted to generic deflection. "Many times when we were in opposition, we had issues that we agreed with the government on. Empty procedural language. No answer to the Trump question. No denial of 48-hour silence. No explanation why Britain wasn't consulted. Then came prepared talking points. I think everyone recognizes the leadership that this Prime Minister has shown. Chairing the coalition of the willing, leading European support for Ukraine." Conservative MPs erupted in laughter. Listing months-old accomplishments, generic Ukraine platitudes, anything to avoid the central charge. The UK Prime Minister talks frequently to the US and deep partnerships on security, intelligence, and the military. Talks frequently was carefully chosen. Not spoke to Trump about Venezuela, just vague assurances. The evasion was transparent and damning. Badenoch remained standing, quiet satisfaction on her face. She'd asked a simple question: did the Prime Minister speak to Trump? The Foreign Secretary responded with 6 minutes of deflection. The non-answer was itself the answer. At 2:37 p.m., the session moved to questions. But the earthquake had triggered. Within minutes, 48-hour silence trended on X. Conservative operations flooded platforms with clips. By 2:42 p.m., the main clip had 1.2 million views. By 2:50 p.m., 2.8 million. Political journalists shared it because it was genuinely newsworthy. A simple question, an impossible-to-answer challenge. By 2:58 p.m., BBC News ran breaking alerts. The Guardian noted the Foreign Secretary declined to confirm whether PM spoke to Trump. Conservative headquarters circulated a briefing document at 3:15 p.m. 48 hours of silence. How Labour lost Britain's voice. Timeline showing the 48-hour gap. Foreign Secretary quotes avoiding the question. £35 billion Chagos surrender juxtaposed with zero Trump relationship investment. Downloaded over 60,000 times within 2 hours. Behind closed doors at Labour headquarters in Southside, senior advisers convened an emergency crisis meeting. How do you defend a Prime Minister who hasn't spoken to the US President during a major international crisis? How do you maintain claims about the special relationship when you can't confirm a single phone call? The answers were worse than anyone wanted to admit. There had been no Trump call because Trump's team hadn't initiated contact. And Downing Street, worried about appearing desperate or needy, had decided not to push for a conversation. The strategy had been to maintain dignified distance, to show Britain didn't need constant hand-holding from Washington. That strategy had just been exposed as catastrophic misjudgment on live parliamentary television. Labour's response was disorganised. At 4:45 p.m., Downing Street stated, "The Prime Minister maintains regular contact with President Trump." The statement avoided saying whether any contact occurred during the Venezuela crisis. The evasion fooled no one. Political journalists immediately noted what the statement didn't say. Regular contact meant nothing if there was zero contact during the most significant US military action in months. Every major news broadcast led with the story that evening. Sky News. Did Starmer speak to Trump? Government refuses to confirm. Conservative commentators had their opening to challenge Labour's international credibility. Weekend polling confirmed impact. Labour's strong foreign policy lead dropped 9 points, their worst single-week decline on any international issue since taking office. Starmer's Stands Up for Britain rating fell 8 points. When asked, does Britain have influence with the Trump administration, only 31% said yes, down from 52% just 1 week earlier. The demographic breakdown was even more damaging. Among voters who'd switched from Conservative to Labour in the last election, the key swing voters Labour needed to retain, confidence in the government's foreign policy competence dropped 12 points. In focus groups across the Midlands, the same phrases kept appearing: out of their depth, not taken seriously, losing Britain's voice. Conservative membership inquiries spiked 34%. Donations increased 28% in just 72 hours. Internal Labour polling showed concerning movement in red wall constituencies, where voters had trusted Labour to maintain Britain's international standing. That trust was evaporating. By Monday, the Telegraph's front page showed Boris Johnson with Trump versus Starmer alone. Headline: The Prime Minister who can't get Trump to return his calls. 3 days later, Starmer gave a staged interview claiming regular dialogue with the White House. But if security prevented discussion, why weren't other Five Eyes nations constrained? The contradictions multiplied. Political analysts noted that Australian PM had confirmed speaking to US officials during the operation. Canadian PM had issued a statement clearly informed by advance briefing. Only Britain appeared to have been left out. Every Prime Minister's questions featured renewed demands for Trump communication transparency. Labour's diplomatic credibility hemorrhaged daily. Opposition MPs didn't need to shout or grandstand. They simply asked, repeatedly, calmly, when did the Prime Minister last speak to President Trump? And each time, the government offered vague platitudes instead of specific answers. The £35 billion Chagos surrender became inseparable from Venezuela humiliation. Conservative messaging brilliantly linked them. Labour paid £35 billion to lose territory. They've invested £0 in Washington influence. Billions for surrender. Nothing for partnership. The narrative was devastating because it was built on documented facts. The Chagos deal was real, widely criticised, enormously expensive. The Venezuela silence was confirmed by the government's own refusal to deny it. The polling decline was measurable. The diplomatic isolation was visible. No amount of spin could erase what had been exposed in that parliamentary chamber. Kemi Badenoch had exposed the gap between Labour rhetoric and diminished reality. Not through bombastic attacks, but through one simple question the government couldn't answer without revealing diplomatic failure. She demonstrated that effective opposition doesn't require theatrical performances or personal insults. Sometimes it just requires asking the right question at the right moment and letting the government's silence speak volumes. The political impact extended far beyond one news cycle. The Venezuela question became a template for how to challenge Labour's foreign policy credibility. Every international crisis now triggered the same scrutiny. Did the Prime Minister speak to key allies? Was Britain consulted? Are we in the room when decisions are made? Sometimes the most devastating weapons aren't elaborate strategies or complex financial scandals. Sometimes they're 6 words delivered with perfect timing. Has the Prime Minister spoken to Trump? When you can't answer that question after 48 hours of international crisis, every claim about special relationships collapses. Every assertion about global leadership rings hollow. Every promise about Britain's voice in the world becomes a lie exposed by silence. That's what happened on January 14, 2026, when Kemi Badenoch revealed Britain wasn't in the room and Labour had no answer. One question. 48 hours of silence. A special relationship exposed as a one-way conversation where Britain's calls weren't being returned.